Lake Serenity lived up to its name the day Lucy and I first visited the lakeside community. The water stretched out like a sheet of blue glass, reflecting the surrounding pine trees and distant mountains. After 15 years enforcing maritime laws with the Coast Guard, I had seen enough choppy waters and dangerous situations to appreciate this tranquility. When the realtor showed us the property just 3 blocks from the community dock, I knew immediately this would be our home. "What do you think, Lucy?" I asked, watching as my 12-year-old daughter stared mesmerized at the distant shimmer of water visible between houses. Lucy did not answer with words. She never did when something captured her full attention. Instead, her fingers fluttered at her sides, a telltale sign that her autism was processing something beautiful. The house itself was modest but perfect for the two of us. A 3-bedroom ranch style with a fenced backyard and a front porch ideal for morning coffee. But it was the community amenities that sold me, particularly the wooden dock extending 50 feet into the deepest part of Lake Serenity. As a widower raising a daughter with special needs, I wanted Lucy to have spaces where she felt safe and comfortable. Our first evening walk to the dock confirmed I had made the right decision. Lucy practically pulled me down the pine-scented path, her excitement building as the wooden planks came into view. The moment her feet touched the dock, a visible calm washed over her. She sat at the edge, legs dangling above the water, absolutely transfixed by the gentle lapping of small waves against the pilings. "Hello there, you must be the new neighbors," called a friendly voice. An elderly man approached, fishing rod in hand. "Thomas Forrester, welcome to Lake Serenity." "James Richardson," I replied, shaking his weathered hand, "and this is my daughter Lucy." Lucy continued staring at the water, her hands now making small circular motions in the air. Thomas nodded with understanding. "Beautiful spot to unwind, is not it? Been coming here 30 years myself, something almost magical about this water." Over those first 2 weeks, our evening visits to the dock became sacred routine. Lucy would sit for exactly 47 minutes, never more, never less, watching ducks glide across the surface, counting ripples, or simply staring at the reflection of clouds. Her therapist had always said water provided sensory regulation for Lucy, but I had never seen her so consistently calm and happy. Neighbors would wave as they passed. Mrs. Jenkins from across the street often brought her granddaughter to feed the ducks. The Millers occasionally fished from the far end. Everyone seemed to respect each other's space and purpose at the community dock. I felt comfortable telling them about my Coast Guard background when conversations naturally arose. 15 years with the Coast Guard. My goodness, you must know everything about water safety, Mrs. Jenkins commented one evening. Enough to appreciate how well-maintained this dock is, I responded, though I noticed a few areas that could use reinforcement before winter. It was during our 3rd week, as Lucy hummed contentedly while watching a family of geese, that I first noticed the woman. She stood on an expansive lakefront deck of the largest house on the water, watching us through narrowed eyes. Unlike our other neighbors, she did not wave. Her posture remained rigid, arms crossed over her designer outfit, lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. When Lucy spotted a turtle and flapped her hands in excitement, the woman's frown deepened visibly. Something cold settled in my stomach as I watched her watching us. In my years with the Coast Guard, I had developed a sixth sense for approaching storms, and something told me the peaceful harbor we had found might not remain calm for long. The community clubhouse gleamed under the afternoon sun, its pristine white columns and freshly painted trim reflecting an almost obsessive level of maintenance. I arrived 15 minutes early for my first HOA meeting, surprised to find the parking lot nearly full. Inside, homeowners mingled nervously, conversations hushing whenever the door opened. "You picked an interesting first meeting to attend," whispered a neighbor I recognized from 2 doors down. "Annual budget approval. Deborah always makes it quite a show." "Deborah?" I asked. "Deborah Hamilton, HOA president for 6 consecutive years. That is her over there." I followed his gesture to see the same woman I had noticed watching Lucy and me from her deck. Up close, Deborah Hamilton was even more intimidating, tall, immaculately dressed in a pale blue pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her silver-streaked blonde hair was styled in a perfect bob that did not move when she turned her head to scan the room with calculating eyes. The meeting began precisely at 7:00 p.m. with a char. Rap of Deborah's gavel. "Order, please, let us begin with roll call." What followed was the most regimented neighborhood meeting I had ever witnessed. Deborah controlled every aspect, interrupting speakers who went over their allotted 2 minutes, dismissing concerns with practiced efficiency. When the topic turned to violations and fines, her demeanor shifted subtly, a hint of satisfaction as she read out addresses and infractions. 1342 Lakeside Drive, unapproved exterior paint color, $150 fine. 876 Pinecrest Lane, holiday decorations exceeding permitted display period, $75 fine. 2219 Harbor View, trash receptacles visible from street, second offense, $100 fine. The homeowners accepted these pronouncements without protest. Most avoided eye contact. When the meeting concluded, 3 separate neighbors approached me with similar warnings. "Watch yourself around Deborah," whispered a woman in her 60s. "She runs this place like her personal kingdom." Another added, "The last family who crossed her moved away within 6 months, could not take the constant violations and harassment." The third, a retired man named Walter, was most direct. "Saw you and your daughter at the dock, beautiful girl, just be careful. Deborah does not appreciate anything that disrupts her vision of perfect community aesthetics." I thanked them for their concern, but inwardly dismissed their warnings. After commanding Coast Guard vessels and navigating maritime politics, how challenging could one HOA president be? That evening, Lucy and I took our usual walk to the dock. She hummed her favorite song, a repetitive melody that soothed her when she felt anxious. As Lucy settled into her spot, legs dangling over the edge, I noticed Deborah Hamilton on her expansive deck, watching us through expensive binoculars that she did not bother to hide. Lucy began rocking slightly, her fingers tracing patterns only she could see in the air above the water. The movement was part of her stimming, self-stimulatory behavior that helped her process sensory information. It was harmless, calming, and essential to her well-being. From her vantage point, Deborah lowered her binoculars and made a phone call. Though I could not hear her words, her expression of distaste was unmistakable as she gestured toward us while speaking. 20 minutes into our visit, Deborah appeared at the dock entrance, clipboard in hand, designer heels clicking aggressively on the wooden planks. "Good evening," she said without warmth. "I do not believe we have been properly introduced. Deborah Hamilton, HOA President." "James Richardson," I replied, standing to shake her hand. "This is my daughter, Lucy." Lucy continued staring at the water, unaware or uninterested in the social interaction. Deborah's eyes lingered on Lucy's rocking motion. "I am conducting a dock usage survey. Our community amenities are quite popular, so we need to ensure everyone uses them appropriately." She emphasized the last word while staring pointedly at Lucy's stimming hands. "We certainly appreciate having access to such a beautiful spot," I responded evenly. "Yes, well, there are rules about dock conduct. No running, no excessive noise, no unusual behavior that might make others uncomfortable." Her pen tapped against the clipboard. "Some activities are better suited for private property rather than community spaces." The implication was impossible to miss. Before I could respond, Deborah smiled thinly. "Welcome to Lake Serenity, Mr. Richardson. Do review your HOA guidelines thoroughly. We pride ourselves on maintaining standards here." As she walked away, Lucy remained oblivious to the exchange, still finding peace in the gentle movement of water. But I recognized the opening salvo of a battle I had not anticipated fighting in our new home. The violation notices began appearing on our door with alarming frequency. The first arrived exactly 3 days after meeting Deborah at the dock. "Violation, landscaping modification without approval. Your property at 1587 Shoreline Drive has ornamental rocks bordering flower beds, not matching approved HOA color palette. Please remove within 72 hours to avoid $125 fine." The rocks had been there when I purchased the house. I submitted the appropriate form explaining this, only to receive another notice 5 days later. Violation: grass exceeding regulation height by 0.5 inches. Please correct within 24 hours to avoid $75 fine. I measured my lawn with a ruler. It was exactly 2.75 inches tall. The HOA guidelines permitted grass up to 3 inches. When I called to dispute this, the HOA secretary, clearly uncomfortable, explained that Mrs. Hamilton personally conducted the measurement. The third notice claimed our mailbox was 2 degrees askew from vertical position. The fourth cited excessive wind chime noise from the single small chime Lucy had hung from the porch ceiling. Each morning before work, I would check our door for N.W. violations. Each evening, I would complete whatever trivial correction was demanded. As a Coast Guard officer accustomed to following regulations, I could appreciate community standards. But this was not about standards, it was targeted harassment. Our dock visits became increasingly uncomfortable. Deborah seemed to develop a sixth sense for our arrival times. If Lucy and I appeared at 6:00 p.m., Deborah would be there at 6:05, loudly conducting a dock inspection or engaging in theatrical phone conversations about community standards. Yes, the board is considering more stringent regulations about appropriate dock behavior, she would say into her phone while standing close enough for me to hear. Some residents seem unable to understand that unusual behaviors can disturb others trying to enjoy the amenities. Lucy began noticing the tension. Her hands would flutter more anxiously when Deborah appeared. Her humming would grow louder, her natural response to stress. One evening, this triggered an immediate reaction from Deborah. "Excuse me," she called over, not bothering to pretend she was still on her phone. "That noise is disturbing the peace. There are noise restrictions in effect at all community facilities." "My daughter is not being disruptive," I replied calmly. "She is simply enjoying the water." "Enjoyment should not come at others' expense," Deborah snapped. "The continuous humming and hand movements are distracting and inappropriate in public spaces." The next day, I overheard Mrs. Jenkins telling another neighbor about Deborah's crusade against that weird child at the dock. My chest tightened with protective anger, but I maintained my composure. Then came the new dock rules. The laminated, updated dock usage regulations appeared overnight on a new bulletin board at the dock entrance. Among the reasonable safety guidelines were several clearly targeted additions. No continuous vocalizations or disruptive movements. All dock users must remain seated in designated seating areas only. Visitors exhibiting unusual behaviors may be asked to leave. Dock usage limited to 30 minutes during peak hours, 5-7 p.m. Our routine specifically involved Lucy sitting at the edge, not a designated seating area, for 47 minutes starting at 6:00 p.m. The new rules effectively prohibited everything that made the dock therapeutic for her. I decided to address the situation directly and professionally. After securing Lucy's care with Mrs. Jenkins one afternoon, I visited Deborah's home, Coast Guard service cap in hand, as a subtle reminder of my professional background. "Mrs. Hamilton, I would like to discuss the new dock regulations," I began when she opened her door. "The rules were approved by the board for everyone's benefit," she responded immediately, not inviting me in. "My daughter has autism. Her time at the dock is therapeutic. The water provides sensory regulation that helps her function. This is a planned community, Officer Richardson, not a therapy facility. Your daughter's special circumstances do not entitle you to special treatment. The rules apply equally to everyone. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires reasonable accommodations in public facilities," I countered. Something flashed in Deborah's eyes, annoyance at being challenged by a relevant law she could not dismiss. "Submit your request in writing to the board. It will be considered at next month's meeting." That evening, Lucy cried when we arrived at the dock to find Deborah hosting an impromptu lakeside wine tasting in our usual spot. 5 women in matching tennis outfits occupied the entire area, deliberately spreading out their chairs to block access to the edge. "So sorry," Deborah called with false sweetness. "Official HOA social event. The dock is reserved for the next 2 hours." Lucy's hands began flapping frantically as her routine was disrupted. I led her home, making a silent promise that this would not continue unchallenged. Wednesday began as one of those perfect storm days for Lucy. Her morning routine was disrupted by a power outage that reset all our clocks. Her favorite blue shirt was still in the laundry. Breakfast toast was slightly more toasted than usual. For a neurotypical child, these would be minor inconveniences. For Lucy, they were seismic disruptions to her carefully ordered world. "I know today is tough," I told her as I drove her to school, "but remember, dock time after school, water will help." Lucy nodded, fingers tapping rapidly on her knees. The dock had become our lifeline, the one reliable reset button when sensory overload threatened to overwhelm her. My phone rang during my lunch break, the school principal's number. "Mr. Richardson, there was a fire drill today. Lucy had a difficult time. She is okay now, but quite overwhelmed. The substitute teacher was not familiar with her accommodation plan." "I will pick her up early," I replied immediately. Lucy sat in the nurse's office, hands pressed over her ears despite the silence. Her eyes had the distant look that signaled maximum sensory overload. As we drove home, construction noise on our street, jackhammers breaking up the sidewalk for repairs, added to her distress. By the time we reached the house, Lucy was rocking constantly, a sure sign she desperately needed calming. "Dock time," I promised her. "Let us get your water bottle and head down." Her eyes focused slightly at this, the promise of her safe space offering immediate relief. We waited until 4:30 p.m., hoping to avoid Deborah's usual evening appearance. Lucy practically ran down the path to the dock, her body drawn to the water like a compass needle to north. We rounded the final bend in the path, the dock coming into view. Lucy froze mid-step. I felt her hand tighten in mine. The dock was occupied, not just occupied, transformed. Deborah Hamilton stood at the center, holding court with 5 women in matching white tennis outfits. A table had been set up with champagne flutes and appetizer platters. Decorative lanterns had been placed along the edges, precisely where Lucy always sat. "It is okay," I reassured her. "We can still go out there, the dock is for everyone." Lucy hesitated, then nodded. She needed this. We approached slowly, the crunch of gravel announcing our arrival. Deborah turned, her smile freezing when she saw us. "Oh," she said flatly, "Community Dock is reserved for the Ladies' Tennis League Championship celebration." "I do not see any reservation notice," I replied calmly, "and community amenities cannot be exclusively reserved without proper notice to all residents." Deborah's eyes narrowed, but she knew I was right. "Fine, but please keep to the far end." Lucy and I moved to the side of the dock furthest from the women. Already I could see her struggling with the change. The presence of strangers in her space, the unfamiliar decorations, the sound of their laughter, all created new sensory challenges. She began rocking more intensely, her hands flapping rapidly as she tried to process the disruption. "Could you control your daughter?" Deborah called out loudly. "We are trying to have a civilized gathering." Lucy did not understand the social demand. Her focus had narrowed to the water just beyond the cluster of women occupying her safe space. She moved forward, trying to reach the edge where she always sat. Her humming grew louder, her self-soothing mechanism. "Excuse me," one of the women said as Lucy navigated past her. The woman's tone was not unkind, merely surprised. Deborah's face contorted with disgust. "I said stop that weird behavior, you are disturbing our event." Lucy continued moving toward the water's edge, not registering Deborah's words or tone. In Lucy's mind, she was simply following her established routine: reach edge, sit down, watch water. What happened next occurred in terrible slow motion. Deborah strode forward, her manicured hands extending toward my daughter. I called out a warning, already moving to intercept, but too late. With shocking force, Deborah shoved Lucy's shoulders. "We do not need weird people ruining our community dock," she shouted. Lucy's body pitched forward. Her surprised scream cut through the air as she plunged into the cold lake water. Gasps erupted from the other women. One dropped her champagne glass, shattering it on the wooden planks. My Coast Guard training activated instantly. 15 years of water rescues condensed into the 3 seconds it took me to kick off my shoes and dive in after my daughter. The lake was deeper than it appeared, at least 12 feet where Lucy had fallen in. I spotted her beneath the surface, arms flailing in panic, unable to coordinate her movements to swim. My hands found her waist, pulling her upward toward air and light. We broke the surface together, Lucy gasping and coughing, her eyes wide with terror. She clung to me with desperate strength as I swam us toward the dock's ladder. "Lucy, listen to my voice," I instructed firmly, using my Coast Guard rescue tone. "I have got you, you are safe, we are going to climb out now." Shock had temporarily overwhelmed her sensory issues, allowing her to follow direct instructions. I guided her up the ladder first, then pulled myself out of the water. Lucy collapsed on the dock planks, shivering violently, from cold, fear, and sensory overload combined. The women stood frozen in a semicircle, their celebration forgotten. Their expressions ranged from horror to shame to disbelief. Only Deborah remained unmoved, standing with arms crossed defensively. "She was moving erratically," Deborah announced to the gathering crowd of neighbors who had heard the commotion. "It was barely a push. Some children just need to learn boundaries." Water streamed from Lucy's clothes as she curled into herself, rocking and humming at an intensity I had never witnessed before. Her safe place had become a site of trauma. In an instant. Mr. Forrester appeared with a towel, draping it gently over Lucy's shoulders. Others gathered, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Jenkins pushed through, gasping when she saw Lucy's state. I knelt beside my daughter, speaking softly, attempting to rebuild her sense of safety. But inside, something had crystallized, cold and hard as ice. Water pooled around our feet as I carried Lucy from the dock. Her body remained rigid in my arms, locked in the trauma response that had overtaken her. Behind us, the murmurs of shocked neighbors grew louder. Mrs. Jenkins followed closely, her cardigan now wrapped around Lucy's shoulders alongside Mr. Forrester's towel. "Let us get her inside somewhere warm," Mrs. Jenkins suggested, her voice shaking with anger and concern. "My house is closest," offered Mr. Forrester, "just there on the corner." I nodded gratefully, my focus entirely on Lucy. 15 years of Coast Guard rescue operations guided my assessment as I carried her. No visible injuries beyond the red marks on her shoulders where Deborah's hands had pushed her. No signs of water in the lungs. But the psychological trauma was evident in her vacant, distant stare and continuous rocking. Mr. Forrester's living room transformed quickly into a care station. His wife Patricia brought dry clothes from when our granddaughter visits and showed us to a bathroom where Lucy could change. The entire time I maintained a steady, calm voice, the same tone I had used talking frightened sailors through storm rescues. "You are safe now, Lucy. Breathe slowly, focus on my voice. We are going to warm up and then go home." When we returned to the living room, a small crowd had gathered outside the house. Through the window, I could see Deborah gesturing animatedly, clearly controlling the narrative. My jaw tightened, but I kept my attention on Lucy, who had begun shivering again despite the dry clothes and blanket now wrapped around her. The doorbell rang. Patricia answered it, then approached me with evident discomfort. "Deborah is asking to speak with you, says she wants to make sure Lucy is okay." "Tell her this is not the time," I replied evenly. But Deborah had already pushed her way inside, her tennis companions hovering uncertainly at the door. She had somehow maintained her immaculate appearance, not a hair out of place despite the chaos she had caused. "I just want to clarify what happened," she announced to the room. "The girl was behaving erratically around water, creating a hazard. I merely guided her away from the edge. If her balance is so poor, perhaps the dock is not safe for her special needs." The calculated cruelty of her words crystallized something within me. I stood, my Coast Guard posture automatic, and handed my trembling daughter to Mrs. Jenkins with a quiet request to look after her for a moment. Approaching Deborah with measured steps, I spoke just loudly enough for her and her friends to hear, but not so loud as to frighten Lucy further. I am Lieutenant Commander James Richardson, United States Coast Guard, Maritime Law Enforcement Officer. What you have just done constitutes assault on a minor, endangerment, and violation of multiple accessibility laws. This dock is about to become evidence in a criminal investigation. The color drained from Deborah's face, but she recovered quickly. That is ridiculous. It was an accident and you are overreacting. No one would possibly believe. I saw everything, interrupted Mr. Forrester, stepping forward. She deliberately pushed that child into the water, called her weird while doing it. So did I, added one of Deborah's tennis friends, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Deborah, this has gone too far. You physically pushed a child off the dock. Deborah's expression hardened. Marjorie, remember who approved your pergola installation last spring despite it being 3 inches over regulation height. The threat hung in the air, but Marjorie straightened her shoulders. Some things matter more than pergolas, Deborah. 2 more neighbors stepped forward, offering their accounts. Deborah's circle of support visibly crumbled around her. Her smile became brittle as she switched tactics. James, surely we can discuss this reasonably. As neighbors, as community members, there is no need to involve authorities or make legal threats. I was simply enforcing dock safety. You assaulted my daughter, I replied, my voice deadly calm. She is autistic. The dock was her safe space. You have traumatized her, endangered her life, and violated multiple laws including the Americans with Disabilities Act. Deborah's expression flickered between contempt and fear. The HOA board will not appreciate your threats. This community has standards. This community has laws to follow, I interrupted. Federal laws that supersede your HOA regulations. Now please leave so I can attend to my daughter. Mr. Forrester stepped forward, opening the door wider. You should go, Deborah, now. For a moment, Deborah seemed ready to protest further. Then, gathering what remained of her dignity, she turned and walked out, her tennis companions dispersing quickly behind her. I returned to Lucy, who had curled against Mrs. Jenkins, still trembling. Can we go home now? She whispered, her first words since the incident. Yes, sweetheart, home now. As I carried her back to our house, neighbors emerged from their homes, offering support, blankets, and promises to provide statements about what they had witnessed. In the midst of trauma, a community was revealing itself, not the superficial, rule-bound society Deborah had cultivated, but something genuine and compassionate. That night Lucy refused to bathe, panicking at the sight of running water. She slept fitfully in my bed, waking with terrified gasps whenever water appeared in her dreams. As she finally fell into exhausted sleep near dawn, I sat at our dining room table and began making calls. This was not over, not by a long shot. The Coast Guard trains its officers to respond to crisis with methodical precision. While Lucy slept fitfully that night, jumping at the sound of running water, I transformed our dining room into an operations center. My laptop open, legal pad ready, and contacts list activated. This was not emotion driving me. This was tactical response to a clear threat. First call, Commander Peterson, my former superior officer. James, been a while, everything okay? No, sir. I need guidance on a situation involving assault on my daughter and ADA violations. I detailed the events clinically, the way I would report a maritime incident. Peterson listened without interruption. This is Sarah Chen's territory now. Regional Disability Rights Commission. Coast Guard trained like us, then went to law school. I will connect you. Second call, Academy classmate Michael Torres, now at the Department of Justice. Document everything, James. Photos of the bruising on Lucy's shoulders, medical evaluation, witness statements, get them notarized if possible. Create the case file as if it were going to court tomorrow. By sunrise, I had developed a comprehensive action plan. Lucy woke disoriented, her usual morning routine forgotten in the aftermath of trauma. Doc, today, she asked hesitantly, testing whether our normal world still existed. Not today, sweetheart, but we will go again someday, I promise. Her lower lip trembled, but she nodded. Water, once her greatest comfort, had become a source of fear. The psychological impact of Deborah's actions extended far beyond the physical assault. After arranging for Lucy to spend the day with Mrs. Jenkins, she can help me bake cookies. No water involved except washing hands, and I will help with that. I began executing my plan. First stop, our family doctor, who documented the bruising on Lucy's shoulders and noted her acute stress response. This constitutes assault and has caused significant psychological trauma, she wrote in her official report. The patient now exhibits signs of water-related anxiety consistent with traumatic experience. Next, the retired judge 3 doors down, who had offered his assistance the previous evening. Thomas mentioned the incident, Judge Roberts said, inviting me into his study. Deplorable behavior. I was an ADA compliance judge for 12 years before retirement. What she did violates federal law on multiple levels. He reviewed my documentation, adding notes about relevant precedents and jurisdiction questions. The HOA is subject to federal accessibility laws. Any attempt to limit access based on disability is explicitly prohibited. Throughout the day, a surprising network of support emerged. The quiet couple who never attended HOA meetings revealed a 2-year documentation of Deborah's selective enforcement against families with disabilities or minorities. We have been keeping records, waiting for someone willing to challenge her, Mrs. Chen explained, handing me a thumb drive. 15 incidents, all with dates, times, and specifics. When my official request for the dock safety inspection records returned empty, no such records exist, claimed the HOA secretary nervously. I called in a professional Coast Guard inspector as a personal favor. Commander Wilson arrived in uniform, clipboard in hand. Unofficial capacity, of course, he explained, but my findings can become official very quickly if needed. His inspection was thorough and damning. 3 critical safety violations: insufficient lighting for evening use, inadequate railing at the deep water section, and most significantly, no accessible entry points as mandated by federal maritime facility regulations. Were these issues previously reported? I asked, already suspecting the answer. According to your neighbors, all 3 were submitted as maintenance requests to the HOA over the past 18 months. All appear to have been ignored. By afternoon, Deborah's emergency response became evident. An emergency HOA board meeting notice appeared on every door, scheduled for the following evening. The carefully worded announcement cited recent disturbing behavior and false allegations by a new resident threatening legal action against our community. As I collected the notice from our door, Mrs. Jenkins approached with Lucy. She did well today, even washed her hands twice with help. Lucy looked exhausted but calmer. Small victories. There is something else you should know, Mrs. Jenkins added quietly. Deborah has been calling board members all day. My husband is on the architectural committee. She is trying to rally support, claiming you are unstable and threatening the community. Thank you for telling me. That evening, as I organized my evidence with the same attention to detail that had prepared me for maritime disaster response, the doorbell rang. A small group of neighbors stood outside, led by Mr. Forrester. We heard about tomorrow's meeting, he said. We want you to know many of us plan to speak. This has gone on too long. Behind him, at least 15 neighbors nodded in agreement. Some I recognized, others I had never met, all united by a common purpose. This is not revenge I seek, I told them honestly, but accountability, the cornerstone of every oath I have ever taken. As they left, Lucy appeared beside me. Are those people going to help make the dock safe again? She asked. Yes, sweetheart, I think they are. For the first time since the incident, Lucy's hands fluttered with something other than anxiety, a small spark of hope. The community clubhouse had never been so packed. Residents filled every chair, lined the walls, and spilled out into the hallway. The tension hung thick in the air as Deborah Hamilton, dressed in a power suit that screamed authority, called the emergency meeting to order. We are gathered to address disturbing developments within our community, she began, voice steady with practiced control. A new resident has made concerning accusations and threatened legal action that could cost every homeowner thousands in increased dues and legal fees. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Deborah continued painting herself as the victim of my militant overreaction. Her presentation was polished, her language carefully chosen to avoid directly addressing the assault while emphasizing the financial threat to the community. While we sympathize with families facing challenges, our community standards exist to protect everyone's property values and enjoyment, she concluded. We cannot allow one resident to dictate policy through intimidation and threats. When my turn came, I approached the podium calmly. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. 15 years enforcing maritime law taught me that authority comes not from volume, but from unwavering command of facts. Good evening, my name is Lieutenant Commander James Richardson, United States Coast Guard. 3 days ago, my 12-year-old daughter Lucy was physically assaulted at our community dock. The room fell silent as I methodically presented the evidence, not with emotion, but with precise, irrefutable documentation. The Coast Guard Inspection Report, the Americans with Disabilities Act requirements for public facilities, the witness statements, the medical assessment of Lucy's injuries and psychological trauma, the pattern of discrimination established through documented evidence. This is not simply about one incident, I explained. This is about systemic failure to comply with federal law and basic human decency. As I concluded, Mrs. Jenkins rose from her seat. I would like to speak. Her voice wavered but strengthened as she continued. My grandson Ethan has cerebral palsy. 2 summers ago, Deborah told me he could not use his mobility devices on the dock because they damaged the aesthetic appeal of the lakefront. We stopped bringing him rather than fight. One by one, neighbors I barely knew stood to share their own stories of exclusion. The Muslim family whose request for religious holiday decorations was repeatedly denied, while Christmas lights received instant approval. The elderly man whose application for a wheelchair ramp was lost 3 times. The Latino family whose property received violations for cultural decorations that were identical to allowed garden ornaments on other properties. Deborah's face hardened as her support visibly crumbled. Even her closest allies on the board shifted uncomfortably in their seats as the pattern became undeniable. The board secretary, a woman who had always deferred to Deborah, finally spoke. I move that we vote on Mrs. Hamilton's continued leadership of this association. The vote to remove